Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Los Angeles Public Library's panel for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. I am so excited to be here and have 6 lovely authors with us tonight. Before I turn this over to them, I just wanted to make a few announcements. One, remember to get your library card. For those of you in Los Angeles County who don't have an e-card, you can hop on lapl.org and get your e-card today. You'll have access to a lot of fantastic digital resources immediately. I also wanted to let you know that the Summer Reading Challenge starts on Monday, so I hope you will all get in the game and sign up with us. I'm normally the adult librarian at the Studio City Branch Library, and we have a couple of events planned for next week that I think are really interesting. On Tuesday at 7, we are going to be interviewing Connor Knighton, who is the author of the book Leave Only Footprints. It is about how he spent a year going to all the national parks in the United States. It's a New York Times bestseller and will be featured in this Sunday's summer reading edition of the New York Times, so that should be really exciting. And then on Thursday at 7, we are going to have a local historian present on trains in the San Fernando Valley. So I hope you will join us for both of those events. Without further ado, I would like to turn things over to CB Lee, our moderator. So everybody give a big hand that I can't see to our author, CB Lee.
Hi. Thank you all so much for having us. Thank you, the LA Public Library and the Studio City Branch for hosting us. I'm CB Lee. I'm so excited to be moderating this panel. First things first, we're going to let everybody introduce themselves. If you could please tell us your name, your pronouns, a little bit about your Asian American identity, and then a little bit about your work. I'll start. I'm CB Lee. I'm Chinese and Vietnamese American. I'm the author of the Sidekick Squad series, which is about a group of queer teens that take on a corrupt government superhero agency. There's no clear line here, so why don't Lila, you start us off?
Who's going?
Oh, did we hear?
Oh, I don't think we heard who you said.
Oh, okay. We'll go with Jayci.
Okay. I spoke first. That's what happened. Hi, I'm Jayci Lee, and like a couple other panelists here, I am a debut author. My first contemporary romance came out this February. And I also write rom-coms. This is coming out July 14th. Sorry, I'm studying my own book. Sorry about the tags. And my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a first-generation Korean American. I came here when I was 9 years old, so I am very aware of straddling the lines between being Korean and American, but all in all, I am Korean American, so that's me.
Great. Welcome. Suzanne?
Thank you.
Hi, Suzanne Park. I am a second-gen Korean American, born and raised in Tennessee. So Korean Tennessean, which probably nobody else on this panel is. So I grew up in the South. So that's my background. She, her, my pronouns. I have 2 books coming out. One came out already. This book, it's a young adult romantic comedy about 2 teenagers who meet at a zombie escape room and decide to enter a survivalist competition together to win a huge cash prize. What could go wrong? And this one is coming out in August. It is an adult romantic comedy, and that one features a Korean American video game producer who is a workplace romantic comedy, and she is tasked with launching a very controversial video game, and she is antagonized by everybody around her, including the new NBA intern who happens to be the CEO's nephew. So that's in August.
Hey, Jen?
I'm Jennifer J. Chow, and I'm second generation Chinese American. My dad is from Malaysia, and my mom's from Hong Kong. I'm she, her, and my latest book is the first book in the Sassy Cat Mystery series. It's called Minnie Lee Gets a Clue.
Yeah.
And it has protagonists. Her dad is white, and then the mom is Malaysian Chinese. And it came out in March, but the second book will be coming out in November. And she is a Los Angeles pet groomer, and she has to solve mysteries with her talking cat sidekick.
That sounds delightful. Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Kuhn. I'm a third generation Japanese American, biracial. The other side is kind of German English mutt, and she, her. And I'm probably best known for Heroine Complex. Just like, I'm like, which way do I put this? Wait, I'm covering it. It's a series about Asian American superheroines. It's kind of urban fantasy / paranormal romance. I also write YA rom-coms. I wrote one called I Love You So Mochi that doesn't have any superpowers or magic in it. It's just like people being cute. And I also write a good deal of licensed work. My most recent is a graphic novel for DC called Shadow of the Batgirl. It's about Cassandra Cain, who's the Asian Batgirl. And I have an audiobook coming out in July about Dr. Aphra, who is a very cool character in the Star Wars universe.
Wow.
That's it.
Cool.
Yay! So excited.
Space Asian.
Yes. And Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia Hopkins. I write sexy contemporary romance. My parents came from the Philippines, and I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. I write probably what I'm most known for is the East Side Brewery series, about a family of formerly incarcerated brothers who start a craft brewery in East LA. And the latest one that came out is called Trashed. So this one right here. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Great. So it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We're always adding more acronyms or adding more letters, updating our acronym, which is great because we're always moving forward. Can you tell me a little bit about your Asian American identity and experience and how that informs your work as a writer, or does your experience as a writer inform your identity? How does that play into your experience for you? And why don't we start with Suzanne?
Darn. No, I'm kidding.
We can start somewhere else.
No, it's okay. So in the two books I've already written, both of them are, one is, they're both Korean American. They both have a Korean American identity, the main characters. The young adult is from a male Korean American perspective, and then the adult book is from a Korean American female perspective. What informed me mostly is it has more to do with classism, I think, than straight up as a racial identity type book. Because for me, growing up, not super wealthy, race and class were sort of intertwined as, something that I wanted to talk about in my books. So, the kids go to school with other kids that are, they're not only Asian kids or anything, and it's usually a very environment where they have to kind of deal with both being Korean American at home and then also at school, kind of get along with their friends and deal with people at school. So again, it's very relatable to how I grew up, being from Tennessee, being Korean American, growing up in an all-white environment, and kind of dealing with those struggles and bringing that to the page.
Great. What do you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, I'll pop in. I was going to say that I remember actually growing up, and I was so excited when it was like the Asian Pacific American Month at that time, because I saw books written by Asian authors, which I hadn't really seen before. So it actually is pretty dear to my heart that there's a month that kind of recognizes that talent. So it definitely influenced me early on. And then for my current book, Mimi Lee Gets a Clue, I really wanted to have the Malaysian Chinese identity, which I don't see as much, but which obviously I grew up with my dad. So it gave me a good chance to really kind of explore that. And I really like showcasing culture and just, I think it just is woven into the characters. It just makes it the people more authentic.
Everybody's too polite. I'll go next. So this for me is always an interesting question because I always want to say that I started writing Asian American superheroines, which I feel like now is kind of what I'm known for, and that it was like this noble calling, and like I had like this big inspirational moment. But actually, what happened was I wrote this novella called One Con Glory that was like serialized online. It was just something I wrote for my friends. And it ended up kind of taking off a little bit, like within the nerd community. And I remember when I thought of that main character who is like, like a fun rom-com grouchy girl. I was like, I had a moment where I was like, well, she's kind of like me. She's, really into nerd stuff. She's a journalist. Like, there's all these similarities. Should she also have my racial identity? And then I, of course, did this sort of self-rejection where I was like, no, then this whole story has to be about that. It has to be about like her fighting racism. It has to be sad. Like all of these things that I think we tell ourselves that are actually not true. And when it came out and it started getting some attention, what was very interesting was a lot of people were like, oh yeah, that character is Asian because you wrote it. So obviously, like that's what happened. Like obviously that, you have no imagination and that character is you. Which, I can't really blame people because like she was a lot like me in other ways. So when I started writing Heroine Complex, I had wanted to write this really fun urban fantasy romance with things like, demon cupcakes and like magic karaoke and like all these like ridiculous concepts. And I had this moment where I was like, well, I should just make this character my exact identity because everybody will think that anyway. Which again is not like the super like noble story I would like to tell, but that's what happened. And I think it was while I was writing it, like because I made, the three main characters in that series are all Asian American, which is another thing people try to tell me. You can't have more than one main Asian character in one book. And that was something else that was not true. But I started feeling very moved writing that, even though it was so ridiculous, it was so over the top. I felt like I was finally writing these kinds of stories that had meant so much to me when I was younger about sort of outsized superpowers and romance and like people getting to do fun things and run around. All the things that I think are afforded to white characters is the default. Like it's never really a question. And so there was something about that while I was writing it, I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. I feel a little bit empowered by this. And I think that really led me to kind of think about it more and take it a little more seriously and wish I had a better like origin story for that. But that's kind of how I came to that. And now, of course, I write almost all Asian American heroines. I haven't written very many characters that are not, except for like, Barbie. I wrote some Barbie comics, and obviously she's not Asian. But I did give her like an Asian friend, like a cool Asian friend.
Great, thank you. Jayci and Mia, do you have anything to add?
I very deliberately started writing romance with both characters who are Korean American. What I wanted to do is not talk about the heavy issues about racism and overcoming that and how different we are, but I wanted to write about reality, how in fact we are more alike than different. I write books to normalize Asian Americans in this community, to show that we are part of the fabric of this country, that we belong here as well. And I want people to realize, okay, that's so much. I want everyone to be able to relate and then find some surprise that, you know, there's a spice of cultural aspects thrown in too. It's like my characters don't spend every day thinking I am so Asian American. So I don't know. I wanted to write about people like me, and to show the world that people like me could also have happily ever afters.
Love it. Thank you. Mia, do you want to?
I think everyone said a lot of what I feel while I'm writing my characters. When I first started, I didn't feel confident as a writer, and I think I was driven more by tropes and what would get people to pick up my work for the first time. And just the case was I ended up writing cowboys. And so my first series was Cowboy Cocktail. And those were the books that featured my first Filipino-American heroines, two sisters named Melody and Harmony in the Central Valley. And I had spent some time up in Delano when I was a kid, and it was fun to revisit that community, revisit the history of Filipinos in the Central Valley. And just a lot of fun to kind of give these two sisters big strapping cowboys. Yeah, that was how I started writing. And so it was trope driven, but it also gave me an opportunity to explore the history of Filipino immigration in California and kind of go a little bit deeper with my own identity.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. I love that you all touched upon like so many different issues about why you write. I love what you said about normalizing seeing ourselves in media. And one of the things I found particularly compelling about all of your works is that you're putting Asian American characters into well-known genres, everything from like romance to westerns to contemporaries to mysteries to superheroes. And what is it about that particular genre that allows you to explore themes of identity? Like, what do you have? This is a combination craft and identity question. So go as deep as or as much of it as you want. And if you just want to like wax poetic about your genre, feel free to do that. So I love hearing about genre and writing. But tell me a little bit more about your whole process and what drove you to write the particular genre of stories that you're writing. We'll come back. We'll start with Mia, since I'm just thinking about cowboys right now, because it's such a delight to me to like imagine, like, because that's not something people like when people think cowboys, they're, you know, having like a heroine be Filipino. That's not the typical idea. Like, I feel like it's so like just refreshing just to see like a character getting to have that, you know, delightful romantic trope.
I think it was a lot of fun to explore the community itself. I think there's a lot of kind of unseen, in some ways, diversity in the Western lifestyle, I guess you could say. And in California, I mean, it's such a diverse state. Even rural areas have that diversity. It was fun to explore how to get people of many different backgrounds, but also cowboys together. And I mean, like, I grew up in Southeast LA. Like, I have no business writing cowboys, but it's such a fun subgenre of romance. And I'd read so many cowboy romances that it felt almost like a language that I had to learn. And once I kind of slipped into it, it felt like home, at least when starting that series.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I can go.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Gonna break the train.
Yeah, do it, Suzanne.
Which is what I was going to talk about, actually. What I wanted to do is to make sure that my main characters had a lot of strength. I think Korean Americans, Asian Americans, you know, I wanted to make sure that I had, I don't know if it's a role model, but just definitely a character that people can relate to, but also find as strong people who can get through a lot of adversity, because I do like to throw adversity to all of my characters. And And then the other thing for me, my background is stand-up comedy, and going into novel writing and romantic comedy, I wanted to make sure that the main characters found humor in their situations, but also were funny themselves, so they were able to handle things in a very comedic way. But then also the story is clearly a comedy, not to be a pure romance. So those were two things that were important to me, making sure it was the comedy element was throughout, and also to make sure that the characters found strength at the end and overcame all of their obstacles.
Thank you.
And then for me, I felt like kind of growing up, my sort of like creative DNA or like consumer DNA or whatever you want to call it was an equal mix of superheroes and sci-fi and fantasy, and then rom-coms, like contemporary rom-coms. And one thing I really loved when sort of urban fantasy and paranormal romance started to really emerge as subgenres was I felt like a lot of times they were combining a lot of those tropes, and that was something that I wanted to do as well. And then I sort of said that obviously those subgenres are things that I and a lot of people associate with fun. And so I said, I think, or like when the first book came out, I was like, well, if you want to say like I have a brand, like if we want to use that term, then I would like it to be Asian girls having fun. Like that's what I want to write about, because I think that actually showing women of color experiencing joy and romance and happy endings and getting to have like the sort of outsized adventures that all the white superheroes get to have, to me feels quite actually revolutionary. Not to say that I'm revolutionary, but just that like showing that, like I think in everybody's work here, there's like that showing of that feels like very moving to me. And I remember that I got some review like when the first book came out that I'm pretty sure was from a white person, where they said something like, "This is really fun. It's delightful. It's this and that. It's not earth shattering, but it's fun." And I was kind of like, if I had any of these books when I was younger, if I had even seen them on the shelf, if I had seen any of your books on the shelf, especially where there is like an Asian woman on the cover and she is clearly having a good time, that would have been earth shattering for me. So I think, sometimes it's interesting to hear that perspective from someone who has obviously gotten that their whole life, where it doesn't feel sort of earth shattering or revolutionary to see that. But to me, it still does every time. So that's something that I sort of tried to dedicate my creative career to, just like showing those moments of joy in between, all the world saving and all the angst. I think being able to show that joy and to be like, hey, we have fun sometimes. Like it's really not all about like tragedy and sadness, and some of it is, but like we do have a good time sometimes. So I think like whenever I get to write that and whenever I get to read that, I feel just very happy. Like I feel like that's something that my younger self would have been really, really excited about.
I'll jump in. So for the cozy mystery genre, I really like the genre itself because it tends to be lighthearted, and you've got the whodunit basically without like a lot of sex and violence. And I think I actually ended up self-publishing my first cozy mystery, which has a male Asian American lead. He's like an ex-video game tester, and it's set in Silicon Valley. So what happened with me is that someone from Penguin Random House read that book and contacted me. What led to this new series, the Sassy Cat Mystery Series, because they also wanted another like Asian American lead in their stories. And the truth is that there aren't really many diverse cozy mysteries out there, at least published traditionally with the big publishers. It makes sense because the origin is Agatha Christie and Miss Marple, right, which is not that diverse. So I think that it's just so worthwhile to have that representation in this genre. And my publisher, Berkeley is the imprint, they're actually doing a whole wave of cozy mysteries written by diverse authors, which I really applaud. And so I'm glad to be sort of in this like starting train of having more diversity out there in this specific genre.
It's wonderful.
I'll go, just not to be last. I write romance because I've always loved romance. I was 13 years old when I snuck my first copy of Harlequin. And I must have written, I mean, not written, I wish. I must have read every single paperback romance in my local library. I would borrow a bag full of it like, every week and go through them. But I never even noticed or realized that there were no Asian Americans on the cover. I thought it was normal to only have white people, that I didn't belong on there, that people like me who look like me don't belong on there. And almost, 30 years later, I published my first book with real life Asian Americans on the cover. And this is the first Asian American couple cover story for Harlequin Desire that I know of. And I hope it's just the beginning of a wave of all the other girls who are too young to read Harlequin start reading Harlequin. They'll see that people like them actually deserve to be on the cover, that we belong in the romance genre, and that we could be main characters. We don't always have to be side characters. That it could be our stories as well. And I write romance because I love that swoony feeling, And I just want to say Asian men are hot. I know Hollywood and the media try to, I guess, desexualize them and make them seem less masculine. And I know that's been one of the issues that's been happening. And I want to say, and show them Asian men are masculine and strong as well. Oh, and I also wanted to break the stereotype that Asian women are submissive and quiet and don't know how to think on their own. So not true. So I touch, I guess, on all those matters in my writing, and it feels triumphant. I mean, when I make the men grovel and really earn her respect and love, I think that's more real.
Yeah, I feel so inspired that like all of you are creating such amazing works where we do get to see ourselves as the main character, as getting to have that happy ending, saving the world, falling in love, solving a mystery. It's so empowering what you all are doing. And just totally leads me to my next question, because I feel like as a writer, you get a lot of pressure especially when you're writing like an Asian American character. Do you take into account like, okay, what are the stereotypes associated with this group? How am I, am I creating a character? Am I aware of like how this character may be perceived? How do you actively take into account stereotypes, or whether you're actively subverting them or writing to around them, or being aware of them or poking fun of them? Let's start with Sarah, because I feel like you have a lot of great insight.
Yeah, you've heard me talk about this a lot. Of course, like I've talked a lot about my, my rep sweats that I had when my first book was coming out, and like and still do to some extent. And I think, like, obviously that is something I think about. It is, I do not want to harm the community that I love so much, that I am part of. I do not want to put forward things that are seen as negative or whatever. But I also think that if you are creating a character that is real, that is full, that has many interests and many qualities, then it is a full character. I think sometimes there is a bit of an issue where, and I feel like actually, honestly, white people glom onto this more, where they're like, oh, I want to know when I can say that this representation is bad. Like I want like a chart that shows me when I can say it's like one or the other. And that's not really how it works, because obviously all of us within this very large umbrella, this very big diaspora identity, have our own thoughts and feelings about what that means and what is like something we don't want to see or something we react negatively to. So I talked a lot about this in regards to one of the characters in Heroine Complex is kind of the baby sister. She is the protagonist of the third book. Her name is Bee. And when I created her, she was like this, bratty teenager, like always causing her big sister, who's the protagonist of the first book, like all these problems. And she dyes her hair. She dyes her hair like purple and blue and like all these different colors. She has a streak. So for the cover of the third book, I was like, oh, she has these hair streaks. She has these blue and purple hair streaks. And of course, then I was like, wait a minute, there's the hashtag hair streak discourse, which is like this thing that someone came up with, which is not wrong, but it was basically like, notice how in sort of an effort to create like a different kind of Asian character, like, oh, she's not submissive, she doesn't follow the rules, she is not good at math, like she's such a rebel. They would just give her like this hair streak, like this blue or purple hair streak that was like, I'm a badass. So I like sort of like look at all these characters that are examples of that. And I was like, true. And so I had this moment where I was like, should I not give this character, should I take away this character's hair streak because it's a stereotype? But the more I thought about it, I was kind of like, I think that sort of the definition of a stereotype is not the presence of one trait. It is the absence of all others. So I think with a lot of the examples people are using, this hair streak was supposed to stand in for all these personality traits. It was supposed to be the personality, and the character was not maybe developed much further or was not given any other traits. So I was like, okay, I know since this is a thing now, I have to call it out in dialogue, basically, in the book. So I do have a scene where B, this character with hair streak, is talking to this other Asian American girl, and she's kind of like, oh, that's so funny that like you have the hair streak, like you're a stereotype. And she's like, I'm a real person, so no, I am not a stereotype. I have many other fine qualities besides this hair streak. I have many other things that define me. I am the main character. And, I think that sort of helped me process that. But it is interesting. It remains interesting to me how sometimes there is almost this eagerness to say, that character is a dragon lady. That character is like the hair streak stereotype, without really interrogating what that means and why that might be sort of upsetting or offensive. So what I've kind of come to is that it is like, if you are creating a full character, then the character is not a stereotype, because it is like this fully developed human person. And when I have spoken about the hair streak, I always get a bunch of real Asian girls who have hair streaks being like, hey, I'm a real
Me
person.
too.
I have a hair streak.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, like we exist. Like I've been tempted to get a hair streak myself just because of that. But that is kind of like where I've come to like processing that idea.
I just want to add, like I said, that I have not heard of that stereotype. Some of these stereotypes I didn't know existed. Again, I'm just being me, and I like unicorns. So I put purple and pink streaks in my hair for the simple reason that I like unicorns. But I don't think, sometimes I do complain about certain stereotypes or microaggressions that annoy me. on my most recent manuscript that I just finished, I talk about the heroine where a white character like bows to her like 10 times and backs away from her. And that's from my experience. And I'm just, she just thinks, what the heck are they doing? I mean, I see this in yoga and at Buddhist temples. I don't know what culture it comes from. It certainly is in Korean. And it just feels really weird to me. It happened to me before the RWA implosion at the last Rita ceremonies to make a peaceful protest. I guess I wore my Korean traditional dress, hanbok, to the Rita ceremonies. And
that was a badass move, by the way.
Oh my gosh, I was terrified. Thank you so much for
great.
Thank you. But I mean, at least 10 times that night, I had people come up to me and start doing that. You look so beautiful. And talk really slowly and wave their arms. Your dress is beautiful. And it was the strangest. I mean, I meant to make a point, but it was the strangest feeling. So I included something like that in my latest manuscript. So I don't make it a point for my entire book to be about breaking stereotypes, but I do mention things that happen like that.
That's great.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
No, just really quick. I think what Sarah said was really important, that if you do include something that could be perceived as a stereotype in one of your books, is just to call it out really quick and then make it part of the character. And I think that that's fine, because I think we recognize these things in ourselves, right? Like, oh my God, I really do this, or oh, am I a stereotype? I guess I am, and then just roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like with everything, like it's kind of like what JC was saying about, the like our books may not all be about like racism or, what it is to exist in the world as an Asian person, but that is certainly something that affects your experience. Your identity always affects your experience. So I always hate it when someone's like, this character just happens to be X, because you're like, no, like it's a choice. Like, if you're making a character white, it's a choice. Like whatever you're doing is a choice. And you do have to be mindful about how that person's identity affects their experience. So like one thing I do, like a stereotype, I guess, that I do think is harmful and is often done badly is there was for a while a little bit of a trend maybe of white authors being like, I know how to include diversity. This character is biracial. And as a biracial person, I was like, that doesn't mean that it's like a sprinkling of like soy sauce or whatever. Like, it's not just like a little like spice you add. Like, I am not the diet version of like this identity. Like, that's a whole other experience that if you're writing that character, you actually need to know about. Like, you don't need to like do like this like heavy, like, I don't know. I think people think like assume they have to do like this heavy like research or something, but it's like, just talk to some people or like think about what it's like to exist as that person. Presumably you're doing that with your characters anyway. If you write a doctor and you're not a doctor, hopefully you are thinking about what it's like to be a doctor and not just making it up. Although you can make a little bit of it up. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like these like experiences are unique. And I think that's part of character building that sometimes maybe people who are not of marginalized identities don't think about as much.
I just wanted to pop in, if anyone in the audience watching on Facebook or YouTube has any questions put them in the comments. I will be watching. I am, not will be, present tense watching. And we'll be able to chat about your questions. In the meantime, I have more questions.
She has
Y'all are so
more.
smart.
I'll continue the conversation from before. So I feel like it's hard for Asian Americans to write a story without thinking in the back of their mind, like, am I covering enough? Because people kind of expect you to have this huge broad range and only, 60 to 80,000 words of all of Asian Americanness in a book. So when people come in to read it, they have different expectations. And I find that that's interesting to me as a author, where they'll go, oh, I was expecting to see X, Y, and Z, but this was more about this other thing. And so I think there's pressure just to be able to write and be honest and true to what you're trying to write, but then also have kind of in the back of your mind this other heavy weight on you by whatever it is, society, expectations, whatever, that you're doing justice, but also like incorporating enough, and how much is enough Asianness and Asian Americanness, how much do I incorporate? So that's one thing that's always been kind of interesting, especially as the more books you write, probably you, Sarah, you see it every time you start a new book. Mia, it's just like, okay, what do I start with this one? What do I take into account? What do you not? But for me, I have been trying to both subvert stereotypes, but also bring in realness to all of my stories, based on either real people or real situations that happened to me. Like Jayci, these offensive things definitely happened in Tennessee. So I'm kind of like, oh, I'll throw that in because that still sticks with me and it's a pain point for me. But with my characters, though, they're not your typical, the stereotypical characters. Like when there we go. This guy, he's he's got this, I'm trying to get him in the frame. He's like a nerdy, likable, well-rounded, athletic guy, and he's just kind of a dork. But like I try to make him a realistic leading character, one that could take on action and also think through problems and everything. So I wanted to make sure that he was a guy that you would see as a hero. And then in this book, I definitely wanted to portray a working Asian woman in a male-dominated work environment. And that was difficult to write because it's definitely some experience I've had, but also reading about it and just seeing like how extreme the game industry is in terms of how male dominated and stereotypically like sexist and racist it is. It was it was hard to balance all that and then also have her be a strong person and not get beaten down by all of the things around her. So I wanted to make sure that she was a strong woman that spoke her mind and still overcame everything, and in spite of all the people around her, but they all end up following her lead.
It's interesting that you guys think about it so much, because I feel like when I create my characters, I try to pull things, but I don't necessarily think, yes, I'm going to subvert the stereotype, or, oh, I'm following along, with what's expected. I just try to think of the character and just create them, like, organically. So it's interesting to hear that. So, but what I do is I actually do bring my personal experience. I do bring like the microaggressions or stories I've heard from other people, or, just, and sometimes tweak things based on people I know. But interestingly enough, though, I find the reactions of kind of readers like more interesting, more telling. So, I mean, I could have the same book like Mimi Lee, and I'll have like one reader who thinks it's like, I've had a comment where they're like, wow, what's all this like interesting food items you put in, and they go with like a reference to like spam musubi or something, and I was like, oh, I didn't think that was like exotic food. But then I have like other readers who are like, oh, like, let's really make sure we like have this strong character that's in essence like representational of like all the Asian characters need to like have this message that, you know, we're strong and worthy and we're like independent and, you know, and I mean, I do want like my characters to have strength, but I also know that it's not my main focus. My main focus is like, here's a mystery, you know, have fun reading it and try to solve it. You know, so I think it's interesting the reactions that I get.
That's great. Thank you so much.
It is funny to sort of see that like expectations versus what you were creating or what you intended or the things like that. It's funny because I have a lot of spam musubi in my Heroine books as well, and it's the scene that I put into like the sort of when it had sold and I was revising it was when these two characters meet, because the editor was like, oh, I want to see like the start of this friendship that's so important to the series. I was like, okay, how did they, like, these people are so different. How did they become friends? And so I did base it on, you know, some experiences I had had where they were the only two Asian American kids in this kindergarten class, and they both brought in food that the other kids thought was weird and made fun of and thought, you know, it was like, it's gross. And Evie, who's the main character, brought in spam musubi, which is like her favorite thing. So like, it's funny because like, I feel like certain readers were like, what is that? Like, it almost like I needed like a glossary in the back or something. But when I remember when I read that first chapter at a sci-fi convention, there was this one Asian American woman in the audience, and she came up to me afterwards and she was like, I never thought I would hear spam musubi referenced in a fantasy book. Like, I never thought that would happen. And that's so interesting because obviously it's something I connect to that is not, I don't really see that much in fantasy. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. Like, I hadn't thought of that before. It was just like, as you were saying, it was just kind of like, oh, this is like what I eat. Like, it's like regular food. But the sort of different reactions from different readers are interesting. And I think as to what Suzanne was saying about sometimes there being this this extra burden almost, I have noticed that for both my books and other books by especially people of color, sometimes a reader will be like, I just feel like I didn't learn enough about this culture. I didn't learn enough about like Japanese culture. And I'm like, well, buy a textbook. That's not what it's for. Like, that's not the purpose of like an entertaining fiction novel, to give you like an education on the culture, which by the way is also highly variable between people in that community.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to some great questions from readers. First question is from the Book Voyagers. What is a genre you haven't written, but you are very interested in writing?
Ooh. I am actually working on the side. It's my passion project on urban fantasy / paranormal romance. And I am so enamored with it. And I've always loved that genre. So I've done, in my short 3-month career as an author, I've done contemporary romance, rom-com, and hopefully soon I could delve into the fun urban fantasy stuff. So it's a lot.
Come join me.
I know. I'm like, I have to ask you stuff.
We need more. I love whenever there's like urban fantasy or paranormal romance starring women of color. I just think that's like the best. That's my jam. So come join me. It's interesting because I feel like I have written in a lot of sort of different genres and categories, not as much as some people, but I think at this point, like, it's almost like I would like to do some of the genres I've written, but in the different age categories. So like my first novella, One Kind Glory, was technically adult contemporary rom-com. It's very short. It's a little novella. There's not really like on-screen like sexy times in it. I still like kind of finding my feet there. But I would like to write adult contemporary rom-com again at some point. I feel like I need like whatever the best idea is for that, and I don't know if I have it yet. But I loved writing that book. And like I said, that's kind of part of my, creative DNA. So I'd love to get a chance to do that again. And then I've only really written, as far as prose, I've really only written contemporary rom-com and YA. So I'd also like to take my adult sort of fantasy side and write maybe, YA fantasy. But again, I feel like that's this thing where I need like the perfect idea.
I think I would like to write a little more YA too. I mean, I think actually YA science fiction is interesting to me. I don't know if I can pull it off, but like what Marie Lu writes, I'm like, oh, that's like really exciting, and I would like love to make kind of that world appear. So.
Maybe you could have some talking cats in that. I mean, you've already written, like, you have like experience writing talking cats. I feel like there might be something there.
Yeah, and the people are the pets.
Yes. I think it would be a huge challenge, but I would love to one day write funny sci-fi. I don't know which age group, but I think there's room for it. But and my brain definitely goes there, and I enjoy watching science fiction. I think I just would need to really think about it. Like, what am I trying to do here? Like, because I think I can just be wacky and weird. And again, like, but I think it would be a lot of fun. And it's just sort of adjacent. I mean, I write rom-coms, but they have a lot of tech and science, geekiness to them. I think it would just be adjacent the way how I would write it. It would be contemporary.
I've been writing urban romance for a few years now. I'd like to go back to my small town roots as a writer, but I also want to go back in time. So I think like historical Western. I love like grandpa West. Like I'm an old band side, and so I love like spaghetti westerns. I would love to write a spaghetti western.
That sounds great.
Just putting that out in the universe.
Write it. I will read it.
I know.
We have a question from Sarah Park. What do you think we can do to support creativity and future APA writers?
Buy more Asian books. Show the publishers who still insist that diverse books don't sell and people don't like having Asian American covers, models on the covers. We just need to debunk that whole BS. So that's one way I could think of.
When I started, having mentors was really, really helpful, not only in navigating craft issues, but in navigating publishing and what to look out for and what to be cautious of. And I think it would be great to see a lot more Asian American mentors, both writers and on the publishing side as well.
I think panels like these are great for people to learn more about what we write, how diverse even we are within everyone here, and see the breadth and depth of the creativity and the potential. So I think just participating in, we could participate in more of these panels, but it would be great for people to also watch them, and and hopefully that'll spur more just excitement around Asian authors and Asian works.
I know I've done like a panel for Write Girl, which is a nonprofit that helps young writers, and I think it's great to just be out there as authors, like just to show that we're around and just to have that inspiration, because to me, a lot of wanting to write was for me to be able to see that reflection, in the books, or I mean, particularly if I had the opportunity to go to like a session where I actually saw a writer who like looked like me, I think that really would have like bolstered my confidence.
Great.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was just going to say what everyone said was awesome. And yes, I agree with all of it. And yes, buy books by API creators that you love and tack them up. I mean, the Heroine Complex, my publisher was wonderful. They supported it a lot. They gave me a great cover. They were really awesome. a lot of that book breaking out was about word of mouth, and it was about people talking about it, people shouting about it, people giving it to their friend. And they're still doing that, you know, several years later. So I think like, so I know I as a reader don't always understand how powerful that is to like shout about books that I love, but it actually is very powerful, and it's something that everyone can do.
Oh, thank you. All right, we have 2 more questions where hopefully we'll, next question is from Sarah. How much of yourself do you write is woven into your protagonist's personality and character?
Only the very awkward parts.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that all my heroines are goofy. There's like this wonderful dorkiness to them that makes them relatable. And it's mostly because my sense of humor is pretty goofy, so they have to be goofy as well. And it's so cool that you guys write about geeky heroines who are, you know, techie geeky, but mine are dorky.
I mean, I think that all of my heroines are like some side of me. There may be like a different side. Like people have asked me, who's your favorite character in Heroine Complex? And it's always whatever one I'm writing at the time. That's the one I feel the most connected to. But they're all so different. I think they're all just, you know, they're all pieces of my personality. One thing that I have gotten more comfortable writing about that I maybe wasn't in the beginning is some of the kind of inter-community things that happen in relation to mixed race people. I think that that was something I was really scared to write about for a long time, just because I love the Asian American community so much, and they've lifted me up so much. And being part of those communities, particularly here in LA, is very important to me. And I just didn't want to say anything or write anything that could be perceived as even a little bit negative or bad, or just like, you know, things that take place within the community. So that is something from my own identity and experiences that I am trying and have gotten a little bit more comfortable actually writing about in fiction.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think I would say all my main characters have like that little aspect of me that's in them. Mimi Lee has a little bit of like the educational bit too, because she's taken psych classes, and so have I, and I have like a master's in social welfare, which has a lot of, you know, psychology like backing to it. So it is interesting how parts of me get spliced into my characters.
In my young adult, Nate Kim, the main character, I people describe him as geeky and quirky. And then in my adult book, they describe the heroine as snarky and punchy. So I don't know if you know me well enough to know what part of that is me, but I would say there are aspects of me, or the aspirational me, in some of these characters, to actual people that I am lifting from that are have inspired me to write these books. So, you know, definitely part of me is in all of these protagonists.
Thank you. All right, next question is from Heidi. What has been your experience seeking and finding mentorships and community for your writing? And tell us about some of the writers you love and admire in terms of the influence and impact they've had on your writing.
Oh my gosh, so many. Like it's like asking your favorite book. I'm always like, I don't know. I've never read any books except also all the books, every book I've ever read. But I know that when I was starting out as an author, when I was about to have my JB year, one thing that was, I keep saying the word moving, but one thing that was genuinely very moving to me was how many established Asian American women authors reached out to me or talked about me or let me know, like, if you have any questions, like really stepped in when they didn't know me at all. You know, they had no reason to do that. You know, like Cindy Pon and Ellen O and Naomi Hirahara and Courtney Milan, like all of these people, I felt like really like made me feel like there was a community there already that I could belong to. And I think especially for women of color, especially for marginalized authors, that's so important, because a lot of times we're used to being the only one. We're used to being the only one on a panel. We're used to being the only one at an imprint. We're used to being the only one in the room. So to have like these really established people that I admired so much, that I considered like heroes, say, if you need anything, let us know. And we will also tweet about your book incessantly, really meant a lot. And that's something that, you know, I try to now turn around and do that for debut authors that are coming out now. And I think through that, our community can only get bigger and stronger. And hopefully we can all know that we can reach out and support each other.
I also want to piggyback on that, because when I started out, Naomi Hirahara actually
the best.
Yes, she also supported me as well, and so she really introduced me to like the writing, the mystery community, which she's a part of, and so it was so nice to have sort of that support and encouragement to get my voice out there. And I would say too, now there's like more groups. Currently, I'm part of, there's a Crime Writers of Color group. And so I'm glad that there's this community out there that are able to reach and support one another.
In spite of people being so busy, I've had a lot of really kind people just really help me out, just in ways that they may not even know. So like I know Gloria Chow, Samia Menon, they both were just super nice to me when I was like a fledgling writer and didn't know what I was doing, but saw them at events and then they kind of chit-chatted with me. And then Sandia helped me with my one of my launch events, just doing an Instagram Live, just reached out and it was super, just meant a lot to me. Sarah was one of the early writers that when I was on submission with my gamer book, my Loathe at First Sight, I met her at Comic-Con and she said nice things too. So
I think what I said was,
your life.
I need this book. Please write it, and please like make it a thing that I can have in my hands, because I need this book about like a nerdy woman in the video game industry, because I was a nerdy woman in the video game industry and I need it. I need that book. So
yeah, that was so long ago, like 3 years ago. It was a long journey, and you know, I met her there, and I was like, you don't know me, but I'm. So yeah, you just, you know, were super kind. And then just in writers who influenced me, just people, I'll just say that Amy Tan and Tang-Rae Lee, their works meant a lot, because they were the first things that I'd read that were contemporary and not, you know, some historical thing that I had to read in, you know, a required class, that made me realize that there were contemporary stories that could be written from an Asian American perspective.
At my first RWA Nationals in 2015, I walked up shaking to see Sherry Thomas while she was signing. And she asked me if I was pitching. And then I said, yes. And she said, pitch to me. And I think I almost peed myself. She was so kind. And I think that made such an impact on, I guess, feelings of like imposter feelings, like, should I be here? Just to have one person turn their eye on you and say, yeah, you should be here, makes a huge difference. And I'll always be grateful to her for that.
That's great. Thank you so much. We have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up and talk a little bit more about where we can find you and your work. This last question is about, I feel like this can open up a whole new panel, but we're just going to dive in. Hopefully we'll this question is from Jean, and it is, what did your parents think about you becoming a writer?
I think that was my brother. The bear, wanting to get an answer. I'll pass. No. No, they I think now they're super happy. I think they just needed to understand what was going on and know that it's a path that nobody had taken that they knew at all. And then when they saw it kind of coming together, it started making more sense to them. And I think that's when they were on board. But yes, it was definitely seen as sort of like a hobby and kind of definitely something that was not like, yes, you should do this instead of go to medical school. Or do this instead of go to law school. So, so yeah, I think now they keep asking me how the writing's going. So it's been different.
For me, I was a practicing attorney, and I had to basically give that up to be a full-time writer. And my dad, who's a poet and writer himself, was completely supportive. But my practical mom said, "Are you sure you want to give up all that, 15 years of hard work and experience?" And I just said, without a doubt. And she has been my champion since then.
For me, I mean, when I was younger, my mom was definitely the one who was like, I need you to have a job that has health insurance. Like, I need you to I need you to do something that's like safe and respectable and, all of that. And that is actually part of why I became a journalist, because I was like, oh, it's sort of sneaky. Like this is like a career I can have where I can get a job. Well, this is becoming less and less true now, but where at least at the time where I can have a job and I can have health insurance, be respectable, like whatever. And, she actually passed away right when I graduated from college. So she never really saw what I ended up doing. But I'd like to think that she would still be kind of suspicious. Like, I feel like I would actually find comfort in that. Like, that she kind of be like, okay, this is nice, but is it, are you going to keep doing it? Like, is it kind of a forever thing? I like to, for some reason, it gives me comfort to think that she would still be a little bit tiger mom about it. And then my in-laws are actually Chinese. And it's interesting because I think at first, they were like, this is interesting, but we don't totally understand it. Or my father-in-law, a story I tell sometimes is one Christmas, I think it was maybe right before my first book came out, or it was in the process, but he was like, oh, that movie, The Force Awakens, made a lot of money. Maybe you could write something like that. And I was like, oh, I can write a Star Wars movie? Okay, let me go get that job. That should be pretty easy, right? But it was this very earnest, it wasn't putting me down or anything. It was just obviously you want to make, money at this career. So why don't you go do this thing that will obviously do that? But I have to say, the longer I've been doing this, I feel like the more they've started to understand it. And even if they don't always understand it, they're always extremely supportive. They come to all my events. They take pictures and then print them out on the printer and give them to me. It's very lovely, and I feel very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, for me, I would say in the beginning it was a little bit of the, what are you thinking? You should go on this doctor path. And so I think it was kind of a difficult transition in the beginning, even up to a couple of years ago. I think I remember my dad saying, oh, well, I really never knew that you wanted to be a writer, which was interesting because I remember distinctly taking his typewriter as a kid and typing stories on it. But I guess he just, never it wasn't the practical path, right? So I think it has been a journey that way too, for to have the more support, as I've written more and more. But I think now it's oh yeah, you wrote this book and I'm reading it right now, which is nice.
For my in-laws, it was, oh, we can buy it on Amazon. That means it's like an actual book. I can buy it on Amazon. Yes, that is true.
I think as my parents have gotten older, they mellowed quite a bit. And so since I started writing and pursuing publication much older, they've been really supportive, which I don't think would have been the case if I were in my early 20s. But now, because I write sexy romance, it's like a little bit awkward to talk about what I do, but I have not had better promoters than my parents and my in-laws who pass my books out at their retirement community.
They work hard. Yeah, mine work hard too. Yeah, they hustle.
They do.
When it comes to
hustle.
I love the publicist parents. Like that's like the best. Like my dad is in assisted living now, and when I went to visit him, they have like the library of like all the books people can read. And it's like kind of a weird collection because it's just whatever people have donated. So it was like James Michener, like Contact, and then in the middle was I Love You So Much. Like it was like this pink cover in the middle of these two like gigantic books. And he was like, "Oh no, we're like having a book club about it." I was like, "Okay." I don't know if this is like the target audience, but if you guys want to read it, I hope you enjoy it as much as Contact.
Yeah, my mom asked me for an extra copy of the book so she could give it to our pastor, who did our wedding and baptized my children, and I was like, no. It's a steamy romance, so I think he might have just flipped out. It's like little Judy or Jayci, but I just outed myself. But he's like, oh, that little girl now writing sexy stuff. But parents are the best.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for being a part of this conversation. I'm going to wrap this up with tell us a little bit about where we can find you and support your books. And of course, thank you to the LA Public Library for putting on this panel. Tell us about where we can find you and what books are available to check out from the library, how best to support your work. Anyone want to start? I can call on people again.
Or
you go first.
Yes, go first. Your book.
CB, tell us about your books.
Oh, yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at CBLEE_CBLEE. My books are available. The Sidekick Squad, starting with Not Your Sidekick, Not Your Villain, Not Your Backup, are available to, you can support your local library or local indie bookstore. Also, I've had an anthology, a short story in an anthology come out this week called Out Now, Queer We Go Again. So it's a fun, fluffy, contemporary fun cuteness. So if you're looking for a collection of short stories, that's available. And so I've covered all the things. Suzanne?
Perfect Escape is out now. You can get it. I saw it on the LA Library list, so you can definitely get the audiobook or the ebook from LA Public Library. It's also at any bookstore. You can buy it there too. And then this one is out August 18th, so that will be soon. But you can pre-order or add it on Goodreads.
When where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, yes.
You can find me here. No, you can find me at Suzanne Park on Instagram and Twitter. I have the same handle. So Suzanne Park, one word.
Okay. I feel like we're going to go in order this time.
We can just go in the circle. Yeah.
My name's tag's the same. It's at author Jayci Lee on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And my debut novel is out right now, available on your favorite retailers. I don't know if any library carries it. Maybe the one I used to go as a child, 12-year-old, 13-year-old has it. and I have a sweet mess, a sweet and a little bit steamy rom-com. It's coming out on July 14th, and and it would be great if you could pre-order and request it at your library. So it will be at your library because libraries are the best. And that's it. Oh, I'm also on jclee.com. Okay.
And you can find me usually too much on Twitter, especially if I'm supposed to be doing something else. I'm just my name, Sarah Kuhn, Kuhn. On Instagram, I'm Sarah Kuhn Books because someone took Sarah Kuhn and isn't even using it. And my website is heroinecomplex.com. That's heroin like hero, not like the drug. And then this year, so what do I have? Shadow of the Batgirl came out in February. My next Heroine book, which is the 4th in the series and the start of a new trilogy, it's called Haunted Heroine because it's set during Halloween. That comes out in early July. And my Star Wars audiobook, Dr. Aphra, comes out, I believe, at the end of July. So I still have a few things happening this year.
Okay, so Minnie Lee Gets a Clue is out now. You can get it at the library, and you can also look for it at bookstores or online. The second book is called Minnie Lee Reads Between the Lines.
Ooh, I like that.
You can find me. My website is jenniferjchow.com. Or I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jen J. Chow.
So my books, Thirsty and Trash, are available now. And I'm working on book 3, Tanked, which will be out later this year. They're really sexy, so get them for your parents.
Or my pastor.
Jayci's pastor would like a copy.
And the assisted living facility, Sarah.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Mia Hopkins XOXO, and my website is miahopkinsauthor.com.
Great. Thank you all so much. I'm going to
Thank
turn this back to Emily at the LA Public Library. Thank you all so much for your amazing questions, for the thoughtful discussion. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this panel, and thank you to our lovely panelists and our moderator, CB Lee. This was really wonderful. Please tell your friends it will be available on YouTube and Facebook if they missed the event. I just wanted to remind you that with your Los Angeles Public Library card, you can check out all their books on both Hoopla Digital and Overdrive. And if you need help with that, please email any librarian. You can reach us at the Studio City branch at studio@lapl.org. Also, a reminder that the Summer Reading Challenge starts on Monday, and you can hear more about it from librarians tomorrow on Facebook on Ask a Librarian Live at noon. And I will be back on Tuesday night at 7 with author Connor Knighton, who is also a CBS Sunday morning correspondent. And his book is about the year that he spent traveling to all 59 at the time national parks, and it's called Leave Only Footprints. So that should be a really great conversation. I hope I will see you again then. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and I really, really appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.